Juicy topic over here at TYT Sports. It's an article that actually has re-emerged with the news that Jose Mourinho perhaps is skating on thin ice with David Moyes being sacked again. Poor guy, just can't seem to hold down a job, can he? And then with Brendan Rodgers' departure, obviously previous, there's an article that The Guardian had published. It was more of a fan's question they pitched directly to them is, why is it always the manager who is to blame? And I know to many that's an obvious answer. Many of us who've been brought up in the world of football see how vital a manager is. Now, I have kind of been enlightened to a different perspective now that I came to the United States. I don't think that I would say all the responsibility is put on a coach over here as much as it is in world football. I don't think you definitely don't see as many transitions in the managerial role as you do in world football in sports like basketball or American football or baseball. Even world football, I think, is its own animal in terms of how much managers are changed in and out. So we've brought in Jamie Spencer from 90 Min, a great website. You need to check that out, to talk about this juicy subject. So, Jamie, first and foremost, let's move over to more relevant topics right now. Is Chelsea clearly struggling? Jose Mourinho on the front page of every newspaper, definitely the blame has been placed on him. Do you think in his case, rightly so, he is at the forefront of most of the blame for Chelsea, or do you think that some of the blame actually has to be spread out more, so maybe to the board or to the players evenly?
I think it's a little bit of both, because you've got a lot of the problems he seems to have brought on himself and the club as a whole, with his attitude and the way he sort of approached things after games, and it's making him come across a little bit arrogant, and maybe that's rubbing off on the players, the way that he's approaching the crisis. But I also think that then you've got to look at the players, because perhaps they didn't expect this season to be as difficult as it was, and it has been. Maybe they weren't prepared. Maybe he didn't prepare them enough in the summer to expect teams to come at them harder because they are champions.
Yeah, and that's the main point that I wanted to touch on, is that to try and differentiate between positions and maybe break down analytics of why certain players aren't playing right compared to the way they've played before, that takes a lot of work, and it's not as if those in the higher up positions in the director's box for Chelsea are going to start breaking down, oh no, John Terry's not doing this, he's not doing that. It's so much easier to condense it into one generic statement, and that often falls on the manager, or it even could fall in a general context, such as, oh, maybe they're playing out of position, or maybe the tactics aren't right considering how they've been performing. And that is a very easy option to go to. And most of the time, don't get me wrong, I think it's just. I think that managers in, especially in world football, have got a lot more responsibility. But I do want to touch on a few things, is that world football is changing now. I don't think managers have the say over the signings that they make as much as they used to. And I think Harry Redknapp came out with an article again in The Guardian backing up Brendan Rodgers and saying that he was a victim of modern football. And although many people will be like, Brendan Rodgers was hopeless, he really struggled, you got to look back to the core of Brendan Rodgers as well, right? So he built a pretty strong team around Liverpool, building in players like Raheem Sterling and Luis Suarez, and building a real chemistry, a tight-knit formation that worked for the majority of the season before things fell apart at the end and gave Liverpool, I would say, their best chance at winning a Premier League in many years. And then they sold those players. And many people are placing the blame on the board at Liverpool. They're not backing the manager, because some of the signings, you have to say, were just clearly questionable. They raided lower level teams in England and never really made the signings that had to replace Luis Suarez, and therefore he's already on the back foot. He's trying to build a team based on what the fans have seen as successful, with world-class players like Suarez who can change a season just like that. And he has to build with guys like Ricky Lambert and Lallana, who were brought in, who just really cannot fill that void. So therefore, I felt at that point, far too many people were calling Brendan Rodgers out for those signings, and not enough were placing the blame on the board. Now, that's just one instance. To go back to Chelsea, I think that Chelsea always showed signs of a team that were often open to counter-attack in football, and were often open to teams that would really go at them, because the defensive structure was amazing at points last season, but there was also signs of weaknesses that I could see in the wide areas, such as Ivanovic and anything else. But this season, it's not just their defensive formation that I think has been found out. I think the players are just generally not working hard enough. I think when you see someone like John Terry just jogging back against Liverpool, I think that's a disgrace. When you see Cesc Fabregas sitting on the bench, I think that Jose Mourinho, as much as I don't like him that much, I think he's taken so much of the blame that not enough is going on to the players. Diego Costa, for me, he would just be on as many headlines is Jose Mourinho, because I think that he is, bottom line, is disgraceful as a professional footballer at the moment. He's getting into so many arguments off the field, so many arguments on the field, and just giving off this negative vibe around the team, which is going to rub off. He needs to take some of the blame for why they're not scoring goals. He needs to take some of the blame as to why he's not performing, because he's in the same position. They've still got the same players around them. Eden Hazard needs to take some of the blame. And I think that it is a very fine line, but as you mentioned, it's very easy to just go and place all the blame on the manager.
Going back to your point about perhaps Costa and Hazard, it's also too easy for professional footballers these days to get transfers to big clubs. If it's not working out at Chelsea, then immediately they'll be on the move to Real Madrid, Atletico Madrid, Barcelona, another club in England, perhaps, depending on the circumstances. So there's no long-term responsibility for them because they will have a career afterwards. Their reputation of someone like Hazard is not going to be shattered by 6 months now, because maybe in the summer it'll be after Real Madrid and it'll be a whole new story.
Yeah, and the thing is it should be at the moment for Hazard, is because I praised Hazard so much last year. I actually did a clip on one of the other platforms, the Football Republic on YouTube, and I backed him to be a potential Ballon d'Or winner in the future. And those words just coming right back to bite me in the ass, because I seen signs of such a talented footballer who was working hard, who was putting in the effort for his team. And this year, it's almost as if the effort isn't there because the talent isn't flowing, because his touches aren't breaking free as much as they would last year. He's not exactly beating that man that last year many people would come up to Hazard and maybe not expect him to be so destructive when he's driving forward. This year, they understand how good he is, so they're doubling up on him. They're not giving him as much space. And it's as if he's just not reacting to that. It's as if he's like, all right, I was a great footballer, and now people are starting to double up on me and take me a little bit more serious. I'm just going to back up a little bit. I mean, imagine seeing that with Neymar and Suarez. Like, Neymar has grown into be arguably one of the best footballers in the world right now. And now that with Messi's injury at Barcelona, more teams are doubling up on him. But you see him adjust his game. You see him, he's not getting anything changed tactically. He's still in the same position, same way Jose Mourinho is still playing Hazard in the same position. But he himself needs to work out what he needs to do to better his team. And at the moment, Hazard he's just not doing the simple things. He's not doing them well. And it looks like his head is down every game. And that could be the fact that the manager maybe doesn't have as much confidence in him, but I haven't seen Hazard dropped as of yet. So it does become to that fine line. So to throw it back to you, is there any decisions you think in the Premier League, in the past, or even in world football, where a manager has been wrongfully dismissed from his team and the blame was placed on him too early? Is there any that kind of stands out to you?
Well, I think perhaps one major example, and this might be a controversial one, but I think perhaps David Moyes at Manchester United last year, or the season before last, because he didn't have the tools to be as successful as people were expecting him to be. And there were a lot of players, aging players, that were underperforming. And I think it's taken him to be sacked for United to sort of come back to the level that they're at now, or reaching now under Van Gaal. So, I mean, that's one example. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't agree with that and would say that he deserved to be sacked because of the results. But I think it was the circumstances. It could have been anybody. It wasn't just a case of that being him, if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I think that I agree with the fact. I don't think that David Moyes employed the right tactics. I think he tried to be too Everton-esque with Manchester United. But again, that came down to the resources that he was given and the transfers that he had to make in order to try and build a team around what he believed was going to work. And if you remember back to Louis van Gaal's tenure at the start of the season with Manchester United, they had just as bad, if not worse, a record to start with as David Moyes, but it seemed like he was automatically given a better backing financially. It seemed like he was allowed to go make the signings that he wanted, hence why you get players like Memphis Depay coming in, Daley Blind, clear players that he's played with in the past, he's utilised in the Dutch international stage, and it seems like he was just given more money from the board. And I know many people have their criticisms of the board at Manchester United, saying they're not Manchester United fans, they're just businessmen. And when David Moyes came in, I think that I agree with one part of what you said, is that there was an aging team, and I don't think the directors were wanting to understand that, because Manchester United, I think, towards the latter stages of Alex Ferguson's career, were lucky that a lot of the teams they were playing against just weren't up to the same quality to try and push them, and they won perhaps a couple of trophies, which I think generally they just won it on Alex Ferguson's winning mentality. They didn't have the best team, and then when David Moyes came over and it's a transition, they just fell apart. And I think part of the blame is on him with his style of football that he tried to adapt, but he basically tried to just take the keys that Alex Ferguson handed him, but the car just started to have a little bit of wear and tear. Whereas Louis van Gaal was given I would say a car, but a lot of resources to try and go in and strengthen that system. So good discussion here. I want to know what the fans at TYT Sports and 90 Min think of this discussion. Do you think too much of the blame is placed on managers? Is there any example that you think stands out? I remember Roberto Di Matteo perhaps was dismissed under false pretenses at Chelsea. I know he did a great job there. Let us know everything in the comment section below. Check out 90 Min. Thanks again, Jamie, for coming on, and we'll speak to you again soon.